All right, our new unit is going to be on the classification of living things, how we make sense of the world and all the living things in it. We're going to look a lot at anatomy and also at the cellular level. And pretty much we're using all the stuff we've already learned in microbiology and genetics to figure all of this stuff out. How do we classify living things? So, taxonomy is basically identifying and classifying organisms. And this is not necessarily a new science. This is kind of old. People, since the beginning of time, have wanted to put different organisms into groups. And we don't identify many new ones every year, but we still do identify new species. So now that this system is in place, we can actually, when we find a new species, we can put them in the right spot and classify them. Okay? Sometimes we have to change our classification system. Once genetics came around and we could actually do DNA tests on organisms, we moved a lot of things around because there are a lot of things that we thought we are sure of that this animal is very similar, but when you look at the genetics of it, it's not at all. Okay, so a lot of things changed once we learned about genetics and about evolution. Okay, so basically all living things are classified as one of three things, and these are called domains. So there's the bacteria, which are prokaryotes, and they're the common ones, the ones we've talked about before, the ones that make you sick, the ones in the yogurt and everything. Archaea are more ancient extreme bacteria. These are the ones that we talked about, can bleach paper and are in the gut of all kinds of animals and things. So archaea are ancient, and then the eukarya is all the eukaryotes. Okay, so this is everything from the tiniest little bug to elephants to humans, anything that has a nucleus. Okay, so there's the domains, but really what we focus on when we talk about classification is the kingdoms. And we go with the six kingdom system, although different scientists are still debating. When I went to college, I learned the kingdom system, so it has changed since then even. But the six kingdoms are basically the eubacteria and archaebacteria, which we've already talked about, the protists, plants, fungi, and animals. People for a long time thought that the two bacterias were the same thing, but we have since learned that they're very, very different genetically. And people from a long time actually thought that fungi and plants were the same thing, and they were all in the same category. So we keep separating them out as we learn new information. Okay, so let's start with the archaebacteria. These are ancient. They're prokaryotes, but they're always in extreme conditions. Super, super hot, very acidic, very salty types of environments. The eubacteria they're called true bacteria, basically because they're the most common kind. So these are the ones that, like E. coli and staphylococcus and streptococcus and all those ones we've already talked about. So they're the ones that are common around you every single day. All right, protists are unicellular, so they're one cell big, and they're eukaryotes. There may be some protists that link together to form a multicellular type of system, like algae, but they're still considered to be unicellular because they're one cell big at the base level. They can survive as a single cell. For example, if I took one of your cells out, you are no longer a functional being. That one little skin cell is not a functional being all by itself. But a protist is a functional being in one cell. Okay, so an example would be like paramecium, amoebas, and things like that. Typically found in water, um, but can be all over. Okay, the fungi. So they're multicellular. I mean, they're rather large. They're eukaryotes. They're heterotrophs. Heterotrophs means that they have to eat. They have to consume food. They cannot do photosynthesis. And they have a cell wall. So, kind of interesting, they have a lot in common with plants. They have that cell wall, eukaryotes, multicellular. It's just that heterotroph thing that makes them different. Okay, they feed off of decaying matter, so dead leaves and all, all kinds of decaying organic matter they can feed off of. So mushrooms are a good example of a fungi, but some that we've talked about in our disease unit, different, I think ringworm and things like that are all fungi as well. So molds and stuff like that, they're always going to feed off of something that's rotting, right? So fungi. All right, plantae. The plants are eukaryotes and multicellular. They have that cell wall around the cell, and they are called autotrophs because they can do photosynthesis. Some of them alternate between being haploid and diploid, like ferns. Um, they can exist in a haploid form or in a diploid form. The more complex plants, like trees and things like that, can't do that. Um, we'll learn more about that in the plant unit we'll have coming up. But basically, plants are very, very diverse. You can have anything from a tiny little flower to a huge tree, to different kinds of jungle plants. Okay. The animals are multicellular eukaryotes. We are heterotrophs. So we have to eat, but we don't have a cell wall. Have to reproduce sexually, as opposed to like the protists that can do it asexually, or the bacteria. So we have a lot of diversity because of that sexual reproduction. So an animal is anything that meets these criteria: multicellular, eukaryote, heterotroph with no cell wall. So this is anything from the simplest of little insects all the way to very complex things like an elephant. Okay, we can classify from there based on other things. So the kingdoms are basically your cell and how you get energy. But then you're going to look at how do you reproduce the skeletal system, digestive system, circulatory system. Now we spent a lot of time earlier this year already looking at bacteria and fungi, so we're not going to spend much time on that. We're going to really focus in on the animals for this unit, and then we'll talk about plants in our next unit. Okay, so for now we're just going to focus on that animal kingdom. Okay, so when we are classifying, you can break things down into different taxons. They're called, these are the taxons. Okay, so we already looked at the kingdoms. There's 6 of those. From the kingdom, you can separate based on phylum. Okay, and the phylum is usually going to just break it into 2 or 3 other groups so that we can narrow down even further. So you are going to have to memorize this order. It starts with domain, and then kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and then your species. I always remember it as Dizzy Kings play chess on funny green squares, but you can come up with whatever makes sense in your mind. Okay, so a sea sponge. This is an animal or a plant? Oops. A sea sponge is actually an animal. It's actually does not have a cell wall like a plant would. Okay, a mushroom. What kingdom? That would be a fungi. Okay, here's a tricky one. A Venus flytrap. Venus flytrap are actually plants. The only reason why they catch flies is because they live in soil that is very nitrogen poor. And so they can get nitrogen from protein, which comes from the insects that they eat. So it's just a way to cope with their really harsh soil that they live in. All right, amoebas. This is all one cell. This is a protist. All right, and that is it for taxonomy.